I remember the chill that ran down my spine, not from the autumn air but from the icy glares that followed me into that opulent ballroom. My nephew Michael was celebrating his 30th birthday, a lavish affair with 300 guests, all eyes on me, judging. My name is Sarah, and I was about to endure the most humiliating night of my life, a night that would unravel years of carefully constructed lies and set me on a path I never imagined. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a story. It's a raw, unfiltered account of how betrayal can fester, how resentment can consume, and how true justice, when it finally arrives, often comes with a bittersweet taste. That evening began with a forced smile, a familiar facade I'd perfected over decades. My sister, Clara, Michael's mother, had always reveled in her perceived superiority. She had everything I never did: the perfect husband, the sprawling mansion, the endless vacations to places I could only dream of. I, on the other hand, had endured a string of bad luck, a quiet life, and a heart full of unspoken grievances. Walking into that party, I felt the familiar pang of resentment, a deep-seated bitterness that had been my constant companion for years. Every shimmering gown, every perfectly coiffed head, every ostentatious display of wealth felt like a deliberate jab, a reminder of everything I lacked. Then came the moment that shattered my fragile composure. Clara, with a saccharine smile, announced a special toast for Michael. She then proceeded to recount a fabricated story about how she had selflessly helped me through a particularly difficult period in my life, painting herself as my savior, a benevolent angel. The room chuckled politely, but I saw the thinly veiled pity in their eyes, the smug satisfaction in hers. My face burned, my hands trembled. It was a public humiliation, meticulously crafted, designed to belittle me in front of everyone who mattered to her. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to scream, to expose her cruel charade, but the words caught in my throat. As I stood there, utterly mortified, a quiet figure emerged from the periphery. A security guard, a man named Frank, with kind eyes and an unassuming demeanor. He saw the raw anguish in my expression, the silent plea for escape. He subtly guided me towards a quieter corridor, away from the prying eyes and the suffocating atmosphere. What he whispered to me next changed everything. It wasn't a comforting platitude. It was a shocking revelation, a piece of information so explosive, so utterly devastating, that it made Clara's public taunts seem trivial in comparison. Frank, with a solemn gaze, told me about a conversation he'd overheard, a secret plan involving Clara, her husband, and a scheme that had directly impacted my life, my finances, my entire future. He revealed how they had systematically manipulated events, how their generosity was a carefully constructed facade for something far more sinister. My resentment, which had been a slow burn, ignited into an inferno. This wasn't just about public embarrassment. This was about a profound betrayal, a calculated act of deception that had stolen years from my life. In that dimly lit corridor, a switch flipped inside me. The humiliation, the pity, the quiet suffering, it all coalesced into a fierce, unwavering resolve. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. This wasn't just a slight, it was a grand deception. The man who had once been my brother-in-law, the sister I had once trusted, had systematically undermined me, all for their own gain. The story Frank told me wasn't just gossip. It was the missing piece of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. My blood ran cold, then boiled with a potent mix of anger and disbelief. From that moment, the party, the guests, the superficial chatter, all faded into the background. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory, subtle hints I had dismissed, odd occurrences I had overlooked. It became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern, a meticulously executed plan to keep me down while they ascended. The injustice of it all was overwhelming, a tidal wave of emotion threatening to drown me. I looked at Frank, a stranger who had inadvertently become my confidant, and saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He knew the weight of what he had just revealed, the Pandora's box he had opened. He offered me a choice: let it go, or pursue the truth, no matter how painful. The decision was instantaneous. I was no longer interested in quiet suffering. I was done being the victim. I was going to uncover every single lie, every single manipulation, and they were going to pay. But what I discovered next was even more shocking. A web of deceit so intricate, so deeply ingrained, that it threatened to unravel not just their lives, but mine as well. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and discovering the shocking truth that had been hidden from me for decades. My name is Alara, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a quiet symphony of carefully managed expectations. Not my own, mind you, but those of my sister Cassandra. She's always been the sun around which our family, particularly our mother, orbited. I was merely a distant, somewhat hazy planet, content in my predictable orbit, or so I told myself. That facade shattered, irrevocably, on the day of her son, Leo's, 10th birthday party. The invitation itself was a gilded monstrosity, embossed with tiny, smiling lions, proclaiming a grand safari adventure for 300 guests at the sprawling, manicured grounds of the Hawthorne estate. Cassandra, of course, had spared no expense, transforming the already opulent venue into a jungle paradise complete with live exotic birds and a professional safari guide. My contribution, a hand-stitched quilt depicting scenes from Leo's favorite book, felt laughably inadequate. A tiny, homemade whisper against her roaring extravagance. I arrived early, hoping to blend into the flurry of caterers and event staff, a strategy I often employed at Cassandra's lavish gatherings. The air already hummed with the high-pitched chatter of children and the low thrum of adult conversation, punctuated by the clinking of champagne flutes. I spotted Leo immediately, a whirlwind of boundless energy in a custom-made safari outfit, his face beaming as he greeted each new arrival. He was a sweet boy, genuinely so, and my affection for him was one of the few pure things left untainted by the complex dynamics of my family. My mother, Eleanor, caught sight of me near the artisanal cheese display. Her smile, usually a warm embrace, tightened slightly at the corners. "Ilara, darling, you made it," she said, her voice carrying a faint undercurrent of surprise, as if my presence were perpetually a minor miracle. "Cassandra was just asking about you." The unspoken message hung heavy in the air. "You're late, and you've caused your sister a moment of concern." My internal resentment, a familiar dull ache, began to throb. It was always about Cassandra, always about how my existence inconvenienced her perfect narrative. As the party swelled, the familiar pattern of my life at these events began to assert itself. Cassandra, radiant in a designer sundress, moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, her laughter tinkling above the general din. Friends, distant relatives, and influential acquaintances flocked to her, eager for a moment of her attention. I, Alara, found myself relegated to the periphery, nodding politely, offering faint smiles, and attempting to make myself as small and inconspicuous as possible. This was my usual role, the quiet, unassuming sister, the one who didn't quite fit into Cassandra's glittering world. Then came the grand reveal of Leo's gifts, a mountain of brightly wrapped boxes, almost obscuring the elaborate safari cake, awaited him. One by one he tore into them: a miniature electric car, a drone, a rare first-edition comic book. Each gift was met with gasps of admiration from the crowd and effusive thanks from Cassandra. My quilt, carefully folded and placed at the bottom of the pile, felt like a small, sad secret. When Leo finally unwrapped it, his eyes, usually so bright, flickered with polite confusion. "Oh," he said, holding up the patchwork of fabric. "It's a blanket." Cassandra swooped in, her voice dripping with forced enthusiasm. "Isn't that thoughtful, sweetie? Aunt Alara made it especially for you." Her tone, however, conveyed a different message entirely. How quaint, how utterly Alara. A ripple of polite, pitying murmurs spread through the nearby guests. I felt my cheeks flush, a familiar heat of humiliation rising. The real blow came moments later. A renowned photographer, hired to capture every perfect moment, approached Cassandra. "Miss Sterling, would you mind if we moved some of the less visually impactful gifts? We want to ensure the main display is truly stunning for the family portrait." Cassandra, without a moment's hesitation, gestured vaguely towards my quilt. "Of course. Just clear that space there. We can put it in the gift room later." I watched, frozen, as a young assistant carefully, almost apologetically, removed my quilt from the display, tucking it away as if it were an unsightly stain on the pristine tableau of Leo's expensive gifts. It wasn't just the quilt they were moving, it was me, Alara, my effort, my love, my very presence, being deemed less visually impactful. The air in my lungs felt suddenly thin, the joyous party sounds transforming into a cacophony of mocking laughter in my ears. The resentment I usually managed to keep at bay erupted into a searing, undeniable rage. This wasn't just about a quilt, this was about a lifetime of being sidelined, diminished, and made to feel invisible by my own sister. As I stood there, a phantom ache in my chest, a tall, imposing figure in a crisp black suit approached me. He had been quietly observing the scene from a distance, his gaze surprisingly direct. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. He was one of the security guards, his name tag read Marcus. I could only manage a choked whisper, "I'm fine." He nodded slowly, his eyes, however, held a knowing glint. "Sometimes," he said, leaning in slightly, his voice barely audible above the party noise, "the things people hide are far more valuable than what they choose to display." His gaze flickered towards Cassandra, then back to me, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his expression. And that changed everything. "Sometimes," he continued, a hint of something conspiratorial in his tone, "the most unassuming people are the ones who truly see everything." His words, cryptic yet strangely comforting, planted a tiny, dangerous seed in my mind. A seed of curiosity, a flicker of hope, that perhaps, just perhaps, this humiliation wasn't the end of the story, but merely the beginning. And that maybe, just maybe, Alara was about to stop being invisible. The security guard's words, a quiet murmur in the chaos, had a profound effect on me. They didn't just plant a seed, they fertilized it, watered it, and watched it sprout with an alarming speed. Suddenly, the humiliation I'd felt, the stinging dismissal from my own mother, the casual cruelty from Cassandra, all of it coalesced into something sharper, something more purposeful than mere hurt. It became a question. What exactly was there to see? What secrets were hidden beneath Cassandra's meticulously curated veneer of perfection? I found myself drifting away from the main party, drawn by an invisible thread toward the less frequented corners of the Hawthorne estate. The grand ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and bustling crowd, felt stifling. A stage for a performance I was no longer willing to merely observe. My hand-stitched quilt, still nestled in its modest gift bag, felt like a silent accusation, a testament to my earnest but ultimately overlooked effort. The thought of it, of Leo's genuine delight that would inevitably be overshadowed by Cassandra's grander gestures, twisted something inside me. The estate's sprawling grounds offered a temporary escape, a labyrinth of manicured hedges and winding paths. I walked, not aimlessly, but with a growing sense of intent. My mind raced, replaying every slight, every dismissive glance, every instance where Cassandra had subtly, or not so subtly, diminished me. It wasn't just about the quilt or the party. It was a lifetime of being the shadow, the less than, the afterthought. A cold resolve began to settle over me, hardening the edges of my previous resentment. This wasn't just about feeling wronged anymore. It was about understanding why I was always wrong in their eyes. and what they were hiding to maintain that narrative. As I rounded a particularly dense hedge, I heard voices, hushed and urgent. They weren't from the party. They were coming from a secluded rose garden, an area I knew was usually off-limits to guests. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden frantic drumbeat. The security guard's cryptic words echoed in my ears. The most unassuming people are the ones who truly see everything. I pressed myself against the thick foliage, my breath catching in my throat. One voice was unmistakably Cassandra's, sharp and imperious, laced with a venom I'd rarely heard directed at anyone outside of a phone call to customer service. The other voice was deeper, male, and unfamiliar. I couldn't make out all the words, but snippets pierced through the rustling leaves. The trust fund, the offshore accounts. If anyone finds out, my blood ran cold. This wasn't about party planning or social niceties. This was something far more sinister. Cassandra's voice rose, a hiss of fury. You assured me it was handled. My reputation, everything I've built. If Eleanor ever discovers this, she'll cut me off completely. Eleanor, my mother. What could Cassandra possibly be doing that would risk my mother's wrath to such an extent? The image of my mother's tight smile, her surprise at my presence, suddenly took on a new, chilling meaning. Was her concern about me always a cover for something else? Was it about protecting Cassandra's secrets, rather than genuinely caring for me? A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't the picture of my perfect sister, the golden child, the sun around which our family orbited. This was a calculating, desperate woman, entangled in something illegal, something that threatened her carefully constructed world. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. All those years, all those lavish parties, all the effortless success, was it all built on a foundation of lies and deceit? The male voice, calmer now, tried to placate her. Cassandra, darling, keep your voice down. We're at your son's party, for heaven's sake. Everything is under control. The paperwork is almost complete. No one will ever connect you to it. Least of all your mother. His tone was smooth, almost oily, and it grated on my nerves. I risked a tiny peek through a gap in the leaves. The man was impeccably dressed, his back to me, but I could see Cassandra's face, pale and drawn, her usual polished composure completely shattered. Her eyes, usually sparkling with self-assurance, were wide with fear. She gripped his arm, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. It has to be foolproof. If anything goes wrong, I'm ruined. And you know what that means for us. The implication hung heavy in the air, a dark promise. Us. What exactly was their relationship, and what did it mean for her to be ruined? The resentment I'd felt earlier morphed into a cold, hard curiosity, a burning need to uncover the truth. The security guard's words had not just planted a seed of hope, they had ignited a fire of obsession within me. I needed to know what Cassandra was hiding, and why it was so important to keep it from our mother. I retreated silently, my heart still pounding, every nerve ending screaming. The party's festive sounds now seemed like a grotesque mockery, a thin veil over a much darker reality. My invisibility, once a source of quiet resignation, now felt like a superpower. No one noticed me, no one questioned my movements. I was a ghost, free to observe, to listen, to uncover. The game had changed. Cassandra's perfect world was a house of cards, and I had just glimpsed the rot at its foundation. My sister, the woman who had always made me feel small and insignificant, was a fraud. And I, Alara, the invisible sister, was about to become the one who saw everything. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. It was about stripping away the layers of pretense and exposing the truth, no matter how ugly. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and I was ready to watch them bloom. The party swirled around me, a vibrant, deceptive kaleidoscope. Laughter echoed, champagne flowed, and the air thrummed with the kind of superficial joy that Cassandra always orchestrated so flawlessly. I watched her from a distance, a queen holding court, her smile a dazzling weapon. She moved through the crowd, a vision in a designer dress, accepting accolades for the best party ever with practiced humility. Each compliment, each adoring glance, felt like a fresh stab. They saw the facade, the polished veneer, but I saw the cracks, the rot beneath. My initial resentment had curdled into something far more potent, an unwavering conviction that this charade had to end. I found myself drawn to a quiet corner near the opulent dessert table where a security guard stood, seemingly oblivious to the festivities. He was a man of quiet observation, his gaze sweeping the room with an almost imperceptible diligence. Our eyes met briefly, and a flicker of something passed between us. Not recognition, but perhaps a shared understanding of being outsiders looking in. It was a fleeting moment, yet it planted a seed of an idea. This man, a silent sentinel, might have seen things, heard things, that the glittering guests never would. He was a witness, an unbiased observer in Cassandra's carefully constructed world. Later, as the sun began its descent, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns, I saw Cassandra engaging in an intense, hushed conversation with a man I didn't recognize. He was impeccably dressed, his posture rigid, his face a mask of strained politeness. They stood slightly apart from the main group, their voices low, almost conspiratorial. My heart pounded with a sudden, fierce urgency. This wasn't casual party chatter. This was something significant, something hidden. I edged closer, pretending to admire a nearby floral arrangement, my ears straining to catch a snippet, a clue. The funds were diverted. Entirely untraceable, the man murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Cassandra's response was even softer, a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. My blood ran cold. Diverted funds? Untraceable? My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations I'd overheard in the past, hushed phone calls, Cassandra's sudden, inexplicable wealth. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and meaningless, began to click into place, forming a terrifying picture. This wasn't just about her belittling me, it was about something far more sinister, something criminal. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold, hard resolve hardening in my gut. This wasn't just my imagination, a bitter sister's delusion. This was real. Cassandra wasn't just a social climber, she was a deceiver, a thief. The betrayal I had felt earlier, the sting of her condescension, now seemed trivial in comparison to the implications of what I had just overheard. The air around me suddenly felt heavy, charged with unspoken secrets. My gaze instinctively darted back to the security guard. He was still there, a silent anchor in the swirling chaos. Did he see it too? Did he notice the hushed exchange, the furtive glances? He was a professional, trained to observe. A wild thought sparked in my mind. He could be my key, my unwitting ally in exposing the truth. The thought was audacious, dangerous even. But the alternative was to let Cassandra continue her reign of deceit, to let her manipulate everyone around her, including our mother, with impunity. The party continued its crescendo, oblivious to the seismic shift happening within me, the vibrant music, the joyous shouts of children, the clinking of glasses. It all faded into a distant hum. My focus narrowed, sharpened by the sudden chilling clarity of Cassandra's true nature. The hand-stitched quilt, my humble offering, now felt like a symbol of everything pure and honest that she sought to corrupt. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't let this go. The seeds of betrayal had indeed been sown, and now, fueled by this shocking revelation, they were not just blooming, they were taking root, deep and unshakable. This wasn't just about my humiliation anymore. It was about justice. About exposing the truth of the woman who had always overshadowed me, the woman who was now, undeniably, a criminal. My path was clear, albeit fraught with peril. I would find out what Cassandra was truly involved in, and I would make sure everyone knew. The quiet, invisible Alara was gone. In her place stood a woman driven by a fierce, unyielding need for truth. The security guard's words, a casual dismissal of my sister's supposed innocence, echoed in my mind for days. He had seen something, heard something, a fleeting detail that had cemented his belief that Cassandra was not the victim she so expertly portrayed. His offhand comment about regular visitors and late-night deliveries gnawed at me, igniting a spark of suspicion that quickly became an inferno. I understood then that my initial assumption, that Cassandra was simply a master manipulator, was far too simplistic. There was something more sinister at play, something that transcended petty sibling rivalry and ventured into the realm of genuine illicit activity. My quiet life, once predictable and unremarkable, transformed into a covert operation. I started small, observing Cassandra's routines, noting the comings and goings at her sprawling estate. The mansion, usually a beacon of ostentatious parties and socialite gatherings, now seemed shrouded in an unsettling quiet during certain hours. I saw vehicles, nondescript black sedans and vans, pulling up to the back entrance late at night, their occupants swiftly entering and exiting, always under the cloak of darkness. These were not the luxury cars of her usual circle. These were utilitarian, almost menacing. One evening, armed with a newfound resolve and a pair of binoculars, I parked my car a discreet distance from the estate. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of crickets. Around midnight, a black SUV, tinted windows obscuring its occupants, pulled up to the service entrance. Two men emerged, their faces shadowed by baseball caps, and quickly unloaded several large unmarked crates. My heart pounded against my ribs. This was not a delivery of organic produce or designer furniture. This felt different, clandestine. They moved with an efficiency that suggested practiced secrecy. The next morning, driven by an unshakable conviction, I approached one of Cassandra's former housekeepers, a woman named Maria, who had always been kind to me. Maria had left Cassandra's employ abruptly a few months prior, citing personal reasons. I found her working at a small local diner, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by an unspoken weight. Over lukewarm coffee, I carefully broached the subject of Cassandra. Maria's eyes, usually warm and expressive, flickered with a mixture of fear and resentment. "She's not what she seems, Ilara," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible above the clatter of plates. There were things I saw, things I heard, late-night meetings, strange men, boxes, always boxes. She told me never to ask questions, never to look too closely. Maria confessed to seeing Cassandra handling large sums of cash, not in the elegant way she managed her household accounts, but with a furtive, almost desperate energy. She spoke of hushed phone calls in foreign languages and an ever-present air of tension that permeated the house, especially when Cassandra's business associates were present. Maria's revelations were a chilling confirmation of my suspicions. The quilt, the party, the public humiliation. They were all just a smokescreen. Cassandra was involved in something far more serious than I could have imagined. The realization sent a cold shiver down my spine, but it also solidified my purpose. My resentment had morphed into a burning obsession. I needed to know the full extent of her deception, not just for my own vindication, but for the potential victims of whatever illicit enterprise she was running. My investigation became more aggressive. I started frequenting places Cassandra was known to visit, discreetly observing her interactions. I saw her at an upscale art gallery, not admiring the masterpieces, but engaged in an intense whispered conversation with a man I didn't recognize. He was impeccably dressed, but his eyes held a cold, calculating glint that sent a prickle of unease down my spine. Their exchange was brief, punctuated by a quick, almost imperceptible handoff of a small, nondescript package. My stomach clenched. The next piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source, my mother. During a strained Sunday lunch, where Cassandra was, predictably, absent, Mother lamented about some trouble Cassandra was having with her investments. She mentioned a bad partnership and unscrupulous individuals. Her words were vague, laced with her usual protective denial of Cassandra's flaws, but they resonated deeply with the information Maria had given me. Mother even let slip that Cassandra had recently acquired a new, extremely expensive piece of jewelry, a diamond necklace, which seemed out of place given her supposed financial woes. The necklace, my mother casually mentioned, was a gift from a new business associate. The pieces began to click into place. The late-night deliveries, the furtive meetings, the large sums of cash, the fear in Maria's eyes. And now, a suspiciously acquired luxury item. Cassandra wasn't just a socialite with a penchant for extravagance. She was entangled in something dangerous, something that could unravel her carefully constructed world. I decided to take a calculated risk. I knew Cassandra kept meticulous records, even of her most illicit dealings. She was, after all, a control freak. Her home office, a fortress of mahogany and leather, was the most likely place to find concrete evidence. This wasn't about a simple act of revenge anymore, it was about exposing a criminal. The thought terrified me, but the image of Cassandra's smug smile, her condescending tone, and the memory of my humiliation fueled my courage. One afternoon, knowing Cassandra would be at her weekly charity luncheon, I made my move. My hands trembled slightly as I picked the lock on the back door, a skill I'd surprisingly retained from a youthful, rebellious phase. The house was eerily silent, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. I moved through the familiar rooms, each one a testament to Cassandra's boundless vanity, until I reached her office. The door was locked, but not as securely as I had anticipated. A small, almost imperceptible scratch near the keyhole told me she occasionally left it slightly ajar, relying on the overall security of the estate. Inside, the office was a study in controlled chaos. Stacks of documents, financial statements, and legal papers were neatly arranged on her massive desk. My eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place, anything that screamed secret. It was then that I noticed a small antique wooden box, tucked away behind a row of leather-bound books on a shelf. It looked innocuous, almost decorative, but something about its placement felt deliberate. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth wood. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was where she would hide the truth. My heart hammered against my ribs as my fingers closed around the small, antique wooden box. It wasn't locked, but the clasp was stiff, resisting my initial attempts. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of dried potpourri and old paper wafted from it, a smell that instantly transported me back to childhood visits to my grandmother's attic. This was it. This was Cassandra's hidden truth. With a final determined tug, the clasp gave way with a soft click, echoing loudly in the otherwise silent study. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not jewels or trinkets, but a stack of yellowed letters, tied neatly with a brittle silk ribbon. Beneath them, a small leather-bound diary, its pages dog-eared and worn. My breath hitched. Letters, a diary. This was far more personal than I had anticipated, far more revealing than a simple financial document or a hidden key. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, a premonition that what I was about to uncover would irrevocably alter my perception of everything. The top letter was addressed to my mother, Eleanor, in a handwriting I recognized instantly, my grandmother's elegant, looping script. The date at the top, however, sent a jolt through me. It was dated just weeks before my birth. I carefully untied the ribbon, my hands trembling. The first few lines were innocuous. Updates on family matters, garden woes, typical grandmotherly chatter. But then, the tone shifted. My grandmother wrote of her profound worry for Eleanor, her cryptic references to a terrible secret that must never see the light of day. My eyes scanned frantically, searching for the name Cassandra, for any mention of my sister. And there it was. Cassandra knows, the letter read, the words stark against the aged paper. She overheard everything. She understands the gravity of this, Eleanor. You must trust her silence. It is for the best, for everyone involved, especially for the little one. The little one. Me. A wave of nausea washed over me. Cassandra knew a secret about my birth. A terrible secret that my grandmother had implored my mother to keep hidden. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had held this over my head, weaponizing it in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. The betrayal was a bitter taste in my mouth, far more potent than any resentment I'd harbored before. I reached for the diary, its worn cover feeling heavy in my hand. It was my mother's. Her familiar scrawl filled the pages, chronicling the tumultuous year leading up to my birth. The entries were raw, filled with despair and fear. She wrote of a whirlwind affair, a man who had promised her the world, only to vanish when he learned of her pregnancy. Then came the chilling realization. The dates. The timeline didn't match. The man my mother had married, my supposed father, couldn't possibly be my biological father. He had been away on a business trip during the crucial period of conception. The truth, when it finally coalesced, struck me with the force of a physical blow. My mother had conceived me with another man, a fleeting, passionate encounter. My father had married her, knowing I wasn't his, to protect her reputation and mine. And Cassandra, a young girl at the time, had somehow discovered this devastating secret. She hadn't just known, she had been complicit in the deception, a silent guardian of a lie that had shaped my entire existence. I flipped through the diary, finding an entry from just a few months ago. My mother wrote of a recent argument with Cassandra, a desperate plea for her to let go of the past, to stop using it against Alara. Cassandra had been blackmailing her, using this secret to manipulate my mother, to ensure her own favored position within the family, to keep me perpetually in the shadows. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying precision. Cassandra's constant need for control, her subtle digs, her theatrical displays of superiority, they weren't just products of her ego. They were calculated moves, fueled by a dark secret she held over everyone. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cold, righteous fury. The humiliation at Leo's party, the years of feeling inadequate, the subtle cruelties, they were all part of Cassandra's elaborate game. She had meticulously crafted my reality, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation, all to maintain her own precarious position of power. I looked at the letters, then at the diary, a heavy weight in my hands. This wasn't just my story, it was my mother's, my grandmother's, and the story of the man who had loved my mother enough to raise another man's child as his own. A new resolve hardened within me. The pain was still raw, but it was now overshadowed by an unyielding determination. I would not let Cassandra's web of deceit continue to ensnare us. The truth, however painful, had to come out. Not just for me, but for my mother, for Leo, and for the memory of the kind man who had been my father in every way that mattered. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about shattering the carefully constructed facade that Cassandra had built around our lives. I carefully placed the letters and the diary back into the box, my mind already racing, formulating a plan. The party outside still buzzed with laughter and music, but for me, the celebration was over. A different kind of reckoning was about to begin. The security guard John stood there, a silent sentinel, his eyes reflecting a mixture of concern and a strange understanding. He hadn't just handed me a key. He had handed me a weapon, a chance to dismantle the carefully constructed illusion of my sister Cassandra. The party, a cacophony of manufactured joy, faded into the background as I held the small, tarnished key in my palm. My heart, a drum against my ribs, pounded out a rhythm of impending confrontation. This wasn't just about exposing Cassandra. It was about finally, irrevocably, severing the ties that had bound me to her shadow for so long. I found Cassandra in the conservatory, surrounded by a fawning circle of her friends, their laughter tinkling like cheap glass. She was holding court, a queen on her throne, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. My presence, a quiet disruption, barely registered at first. Then her eyes, sharp and calculating, landed on me. Her smile, usually so practiced, faltered. "Alara, darling, there you are," she purred, but the warmth never reached her eyes. Still lurking by the edges, I see. The dismissive tone, the casual cruelty, ignited a fire within me. The years of being overlooked, of being the less than, coalesced into a single burning resolve. "Cassandra," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the chatter. "We need to talk, privately." Her friends exchanged curious glances, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Cassandra's perfect composure cracked, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "Now isn't really the time, Alara. Leo's party, you know." I held up the small, ornate key, letting it catch the light. Her eyes widened, a flash of something akin to fear replacing the annoyance. The recognition was instant, visceral. "This key," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "opens the old writing desk in Mother's study, the one you always kept locked." The conservatory fell silent, the air thick with unspoken questions. Cassandra's face drained of color. She knew. She knew exactly what that key represented. Her friends, sensing the shift in power, began to discreetly excuse themselves, leaving us alone amidst the wilting orchids. "What are you talking about, Alara?" she stammered, her voice thin, a stark contrast to her usual booming confidence. "That desk is full of old junk." I fixed her with a gaze that held all the years of resentment, all the quiet suffering she had inflicted. "Is it, Cassandra? Or is it full of secrets?" "Secrets that would explain why Mother always treated you like gold, and me like an afterthought." The confrontation was swift, brutal, and utterly devastating. I laid out the letters, one by one, on the polished mahogany table, the harsh conservatory light illuminating the faded ink. Each letter was a stab, a revelation. Mother's desperate pleas to her family for money, money that Cassandra, her golden child, had squandered on frivolous whims. The accusations of theft, the threats of exposure, the desperate attempts to cover up Cassandra's reckless spending. Then, the diary. Mother's meticulous entries, detailing every lie, every manipulation, every time Cassandra had taken advantage of her ailing mother's love and generosity. The final entry, a heartbroken confession of betrayal, written just days before Mother's passing, painted a picture of a woman utterly broken by her own daughter. Cassandra stood frozen, her eyes darting from the letters to the diary, then to my face, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Her perfect facade had shattered, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. She tried to deny it, of course, a desperate, flailing attempt to regain control. "Those are forgeries, Alara. You're trying to ruin me." But her voice lacked conviction, a hollow echo of her former authority. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. John, the security guard who had silently re-entered the conservatory, stood by the door, a silent witness. His presence, an unspoken testament to the truth, solidified the reality of the situation. "Ruin you, Cassandra?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You ruined yourself. I'm just holding up a mirror." The words were a release, a purging of years of pent-up anger and hurt. The truth, once a heavy burden, now felt like a cleansing fire. The party outside continued, a distant hum of oblivious merriment, but in that conservatory, a different kind of celebration was taking place, the liberation of a soul long trapped in the shadows. Cassandra, stripped bare of her lies, finally faced the consequences of her actions. The silence that followed wasn't just a lack of sound, it was the sound of a world shifting, of a narrative finally being rewritten. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned, no grand public humiliation, no screaming match. It was something far more potent, far more lasting, the quiet, undeniable victory of truth. The words hit me like a physical blow, each syllable a hammer striking against the fragile walls I'd built around my heart. "Cassandra, your sister," she knew about the will. She planned this whole thing, the party, the humiliation. It was all to keep you away from your inheritance. My mind reeled, trying to process the security guard's revelation. This wasn't just about a party, it was a calculated, cruel betrayal. My own sister, the one I'd loved and defended, had orchestrated my public shaming to steal what was rightfully mine. The resentment that had simmered for years now boiled over into a raging inferno. I remembered the look in her eyes at the party, that smug, self-satisfied glint as I stood there, mortified. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a performance, a meticulously crafted charade designed to break me. The security guard, a kind-faced man named Frank, handed me a thick envelope. "This is everything," he said, his voice low and sympathetic. "Copies of emails, bank transfers, even a recorded conversation. Your aunt, God bless her, suspected something was amiss. She confided in me before she passed, asked me to look out for you." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Inside, the truth lay bare, a testament to my sister's greed and my aunt's foresight. For weeks I was consumed. The betrayal gnawed at me, stripping away sleep and peace. Every waking moment was spent poring over the documents, cross-referencing dates, piecing together the timeline of her deception. My obsession wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. The blatant disregard for family. The sheer audacity of her scheme. I saw my sister's face everywhere, heard her condescending tone in every memory. The hurt transformed into a cold, hard resolve. She wouldn't get away with this. Not after everything. The day of the confrontation arrived, a crisp autumn morning that felt charged with an almost electric tension. I arranged to meet her at our aunt's favorite cafe, a place filled with bittersweet memories. She walked in, her usual air of effortless superiority, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Cassandra, what a surprise," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the sister I once knew, but a stranger, hardened by avarice. "I know," I stated, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. Her smile faltered. "I know everything, Sarah. The will, the party, your little scheme to cut me out." I laid the envelope on the table between us, the documents fanning out like a hand of cards, her face drained of color, her eyes darting from me to the papers, then back to me. The mask of innocence crumbled, revealing a flicker of panic, then pure, unadulterated rage. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice rising. "You think you can just waltz back into my life and accuse me of such things?" But her bluster was hollow. She knew I had her. I calmly recited the details, the dates, the amounts, the coded language in her emails. Each word was a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed lie. She tried to deny, to deflect, to manipulate, but I was unyielding. The years of being overshadowed, dismissed, and now betrayed, had forged an iron will within me. The justice I sought wasn't just financial. It was the truth, laid bare for all to see. I filed the lawsuit, presenting the irrefutable evidence Frank had provided. The legal battle was grueling, emotionally draining, but I stood firm. The court ruled in my favor, restoring my rightful inheritance and exposing Sarah's deceit. The news spread like wildfire through our extended family, shattering her carefully cultivated image. The closure that followed was bittersweet. I had won, but at what cost? The sister I once adored was gone, replaced by a bitter, resentful stranger. The family fractured, some siding with me, others clinging to the illusion of Sarah's innocence. I gained my inheritance, but lost a piece of my past, a dream of reconciliation that would never materialize. Yet, there was a quiet peace in knowing I had stood up for myself, that I had refused to be a victim. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the most painful truths set you free, even if they leave scars. The humiliation at the party had been a catalyst, a brutal awakening that ultimately led me to reclaim not just my inheritance, but my own strength and dignity.